and the impurities rose to the top, and that leads us to transforming or correction. Now, correction is what each one of you thought of in your mind when you thought about the word discipline. Until you heard disciple, then you kind of got a little bit off that. And so I just want to start out by saying, you do, I watch. Look at this, 3-to-1 formative to reformative. 3-to-1. The first three form you. It's only the last one that reforms you, the correcting. Kids would take it a lot better if correcting was all done after teaching, training, and testing. It's just a natural part of it. Yet how many of us maybe teach, and then we jump right to correction, and jump right to correction, and jump right to correction. And we don't just do it with our kids. We do it in churches. We do it with our businesses and people we're leading. We say something, then we correct. We say something, then we correct. What about training and testing? It's interesting. Now, Proverbs 29:19 talks about this, and it says it's not done just with words. A servant cannot be corrected by mere words. Though he understands, he will not respond. It takes action. There needs to be a behavior mechanism. Something's going to adjust the behavior. Proverbs 13:18 says, he who ignores discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored. It's interesting, Proverbs 12:1 says a stupid one hates correction. And Proverbs 10:17 says, ignoring it leads others astray. We see that on football fields, basketball courts, tennis courts, soccer fields, baseball fields, that the person who ignored discipline leads everybody else astray. How are you going to do it? There's three ways. There's three ways. 3 ways to bring that behavior modification. And the first one is positive reinforcement. It's what I did with the girls, positive reinforcement. I gave them each grace. I gave them each the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup to reinforce their positive behavior. Number 2 is negative reinforcement. I take something away to reinforce the behavior I wish I would have seen that they did not do. I take something away for behavior that was not what we were looking for. Number 3 is I punish. I punish. Now, punishment needs to be swift, fair, and appropriate. The time needs to fit the crime. One thing I don't like is when we say you can't go to youth group tonight because you didn't do such and such, unless maybe it's homework. We got to be careful what we're using to create the consequences. They ought to be related so that they learn and feel what we wanted them to learn and feel. Short-term consequences are much better than long-term crisis. And this is done out of love. Teach, train, test, transform. There's a recent survey, I don't know if you heard it this week, of several corporate CEOs. 100% of the corporate CEOs surveyed were spanked as children. Those who had discipline are those who are making disciples. And that's exactly the way it's going to be. Those who have discipline are those who will make disciples. And it includes transforming or correcting the behavior. You do, I watch. Now my mom and dad watch me do the things that they taught me. Now I'm watching Lily read this to me. I guess my question for you is, because, you know, Jesus did this. Jesus brought the disciples back after he sent them out, and he said, okay, let's debrief a little bit. What impurities rose to the top? Let's correct those. And then Jesus died, resurrected, ascended, and left his disciples to do it. Jesus' role, in essence, his oversimplification, was to get himself out of a job and to live it through other people. My question to you is, what are you watching your kids do? What are you watching your kids do? What are you helping your kids do? What are your kids helping you do? What are your kids watching you do? You know, as I look through this and I see that Christ is the model, I look back on my mom and my dad and their investment in me, and I look at how I'm trying to pay that forward in my kids and in coaching and all that, and I look at the model of Christ. Be a disciple of Christ, have his discipline in your life so that grace wins, the steering wheel of grace. Discipline is the steering wheel of grace. And I realize that it wasn't my mom and dad. It's not me, and it's not you. It's Christ in us. The capital S Spirit of Christ in us. That's the discipline. That's the discipleship. It's Christ in me. And in Hebrews 12, 1 through 6, it kind of sums this all up. It talks about fixing your eyes on Christ. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do, to fix your eyes on Him, to know Him, to have a model of His behavior, to read the Bible for yourselves. I got my oldest two now reading chapter a day, and it's hit and miss, but this is now the beginning of a lifelong thing. I want them to read a chapter a day in Proverbs corresponding with the date of the month. And I wanted them to close their days. I want them to open their day that way. I want them to close it with one chapter in the New Testament. So every day, every year for the rest of their lives, they will read through the New Testament and Proverbs, 12 times in Proverbs. And then I'm going to ask them to come to the graduate level and to read 3 chapters a day in the Old, so that every year for the rest of their lives, they will experience what has transformed my life more than any one thing. And the writer of Hebrews says, fix your eyes on Christ. It's His Spirit. A runner would have to fix his eyes on a marker. And he's saying, let your marker be Christ, and throw off the sin that entangles us. The picture is these weights of sin and pride that would have been in the fabric, woven in the fabric of their jerseys that they would have trained with, and they take those off so now they can run faster. Go on to verse 3. Consider Him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood, but Christ did. And you have forgotten that word of encouragement that addresses you as sons, and this is where it comes around full circle, literally. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when He rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those He loves, and He punishes everyone He accepts as a son. Discipline is the steering wheel of grace. I've asked Steph to come up, and I want to ask you to do one more thing. And that is to use the Bible humbly. Humbly. What I mean by that is you don't lord it over your kids. You don't say, Proverbs 3:11 and 12 says, you idiot. And you don't do that. You have this going on in your own life, and so you say, I was reading Proverbs today. And I read in chapter 3 this, and this is how I'm going to try to apply it to my life. Why don't we try to do that together? And there's a humility. And what's amazing to me here is it's not, now listen to this, it's not us, it's Christ in us, but we embrace Christ as teacher. We embrace Christ as trainer. We embrace Christ as tester. We embrace Christ as transformer, and we make disciples of Christ in our kids. So listen to these words. I'd like you to bow your heads and to hold the palms of your hands up on your knees. And I'd like you, just as Steph sings, to invite Christ to show you where you might be missing the mark, where you might be twisting wrongs to make them right, where you might be just flat out breaking God's law, where you might be leaving good undone. And would you commit today to allow Christ in you to teach, to train, to test, and transform you, your kids, your coworkers, your entire circle of influence. So close your eyes, bow your head, palms up on your knees, and just ask the Spirit of Christ to move in you today.